Today class, we'll be talking about cognitive behavior therapy. Before I get started with the lecture, I would like for you to review this particular video. If you're unable to find the video, just type in the name Rational Song as Shame, Attack, and Exercise and REBT, which is Rational Emotive Behavior Therapy. Pause the video, and once you have actually viewed the video, then come back and we'll continue the lecture. Now, I don't know if you were able to recognize the diagnosis that the gentleman had received. He has a diagnosis of depression, and instead of him walking around with a veil of shame as an umbrella that's similar to an umbrella that covers you, he decided that he would attack the feelings that he might experience being out in society if someone found out that he had been diagnosed with depression or a mental illness. What are the basic philosophies of cognitive behavior therapy? The basic philosophies. Individuals incorporate faulty thinking. This is the belief, which leads to emotional and behavioral disturbances. Emotional and behavioral disturbances. So there is these faulty thinking, this faulty belief system that we have. These faulty beliefs are basically cognitions. They are major determinants of how we feel and how we act. For this particular lecture, and for future references, we're going to talk about cognitions. Cognitions are basically perceptions or intuitions, these feelings that people have towards something. Therefore, they react accordingly. The therapy is a psychoeducational model, which means that it has a learning component within it. It's a learning process that is about acquiring and practicing new skills, learning new ways of thinking, acquiring more effective ways of coping with problems. Key concepts. Key concepts. Psychological problems caused by childhood and reinforced by your current way of thinking, by your childhood experiences. For example, someone told you that you were fat as a child. You go into the store and you try on clothes and the clothes are too little. You have to move over to what's considered plus size or husky. This simple act reinforced some of those things that people told you at a younger age, and now it makes you feel like you're fat. Moving on. A person's belief system is considered schema or schemata, and thinking primary cause of disorder. A person's belief system, so this schemata or the schema that we develop affects how we react to situations and how we deal with things in our future. The key concept, again, one of the key concepts with the particular therapy is to replace faulty assumptions and misconceptions with effective beliefs. Replace those faulty assumptions and misconceptions with effective beliefs. Now, I always include a graphic on a slide that relates to the content within the slide. Here we look at the graphic. It says key concepts. Function. How does it work? Change. How is it changing? Reflection. How do we know? Causation. Why is it like it is? Perspective. What are the points of view? Connection. How is it connected to Now, that's something I can't read right quick. To changing thinking. Responsibility. What is our responsibility? Inform. What is it like? The goal of therapy. The goal of therapy is basically to teach confrontation of those faulty beliefs through gathering and evaluating evidence. It helps the client minimize faulty beliefs. That's what you're going to do. You're going to gather information. How do you acquire this information? You're going to receive it through reports or through your interview that you have with your consumer or your client. The goal is also to help them become aware of automatic thoughts and correct them. Help the client identify strengths and to explore the kind of life they would like to live. That's the goal of therapy. Now, what is the therapeutic relationship like in cognitive behavior therapy or behavior therapy? Rational emotive behavior therapy, the therapist is the teacher and the client is the student. Now, remember, I told you that there were some therapeutic approaches in which the relationship, you've seen so much literature aside from Freud, all of the other theories that we've covered. We talk about Adler, we talked about existential, we talked about Gestalt. We talked about several different theories before, and what was the relationship like for those? They were collaborative. Now, REBT, rational emotive behavior therapy, the therapist is the teacher and the client is the student. So the therapist is more directive in their approach. CBT, cognitive behavior therapy, it's a collaborative relationship. So again, this little graphic, you don't say much, but I'm told it's the therapeutic relationship that counts. Just remember, REBT, therapist is the teacher and the client is the student. So it's more directive. Of course, you want to have a good therapeutic relationship with them, but you're the teacher. Now, what is cognitive behavior therapy effective in treating? Anxiety, depression, relationship problems, stress management, skills training, assertion training, eating disorders, phobias, marital problems, sexual disorders, behavior disorders in children, and prevention of cardiovascular disease. Prevention of cardiovascular disease. Remember, stress is a key factor, one of those key factors in cardiovascular disease. First, we'll talk about rational emotive behavior therapy. What is rational emotive behavior therapy? The theory of personality, terms of nature of their self-talk, internal cognitive dialogue. So Albert Ellis is considered the father of rational emotive behavior therapy. He says that we learn things about people from their self-talk, that internal cognitive dialogue that they have, the things that they say about themselves. His view of human nature is that people can be self-preserving or self-destructive. People can be rational or irrational. So when you think about REBT and you see it maybe on some exams in the future or tests, just think REBT, rational or irrational. People have the ability to be rational or irrational in their thinking. What Dr. Ellis says is that therapy is a process of re-education. Therapy is a process of re-education. Now, when we're talking about Albert Ellis's REBT, rational thinking promotes happiness and survival. A rational thought is, I'm not the best at kayaking, but I love to do it. Irrational thinking things that inhibit our personal happiness and survival. Irrational ideals lead to self-defeating behaviors. I'm never going to understand math. The entire world is made up of liars and thieves. Now, some of you say that's true, but that's really not true. The world is not made up of, the entire world is not made up of liars and thieves. Again, look at the little exercise that was used in the particular graphic we have here. Irrational thoughts and irrational thoughts, writing them down on both sides. Isn't that neat? Now, remember I said that REBT was about re-education. It's an educational process. The clients learn to identify the interplay of their thoughts, feelings, and behaviors. They also learn to identify and disrupt irrational beliefs that are maintained by self-indoctrination. They learn to replace ineffective ways of thinking with effective and rational cognitions. What is cognitions? They learn to stop absolutistic thinking, behavior, and repeating false beliefs. It teaches that our emotions stem mainly from our beliefs, evaluations, interpretations, and reactions to life situations. The role of the therapist is that of the teacher and the client is the student. A personal relationship is not necessary. I just want to reiterate that. The role of cognition, basically, what is cognition? One's perceptions. Rational behavior is anything that promotes happiness and survival. I'll repeat that. One way to identify the statements that are made include words such as should or must or ought. Also, self-defeating statements such as self-damnation. I can't stand it. It is awfulizing. Note, do not focus on the words or the statements only. Do not focus on the words or the statements only, but we're thinking about the emotion or the meaning attached to each. Before I discuss this slide, I would like for you to look at the video. Again, pause the slides, open up a different browser, go to YouTube, and watch this particular video. And when you finish, then come back to continue the lecture. Now that you've seen the video, what are your feelings? What are your emotions? How do you feel about it? Do you feel a little anger? Well, that's not what I'm going to talk about. I'm going to actually talk about the person in the video. Here, this is just some food for thought. The 4 roots of anger. Anger is a secondary emotion, not a primary one. Anger comes after a primary emotion. Cognition. Figuring out what primary emotions you're experiencing will allow you to lessen your anger and respond more appropriately. In the video, do you think that the young lady that was upset in the video and ran over the couple for reporting her, what type of emotions do you think she had? The anger. What do you think it was attached to? Because the root of anger, these are 4 areas that it could fall underneath, which would be the primary emotion, which is hurt, fear, helplessness or inadequacy, and guilt. That's some. So what do you think the young lady that ran over the couple, what do you think she felt? All right. Now, rational emotive behavior therapy. One of the particular techniques that's used is, how do I know my ABCDEs? The A, B, C, D, E, and F approach. A is the activating event, what happened. B is the belief system. What does the client believe will happen? C, consequences of the emotions for the client. D, clients learn to dispute self-defeating language. And E, effective or the effect of the reaction. Hopefully it's a positive one. The ABC theory of personality. Again, for those that are more visual in their learning, A is the activating event or the situation. B is the belief. C, consequences. D, the disputing intervention. E, affective philosophy. F, new feeling. Now, do you think that A causes C? The activating event causes some type of consequences? Let's find out. Here's an example of the theory. A, my friend ignores me. B, that makes I start to believe that I'm unacceptable as a friend, so I must be worthless. C, the consequences of my action is my emotions, I'm depressed. My behavior, I avoid my friend. D, what evidence says I'm worthless? Disputing these. E, I don't have to be accepted or liked by all. So that's an effect of the reaction. Or F, there's just disappointment in the friend. Now, what I would like to say here is that A doesn't cause C. A, the event, doesn't cause C, the consequences or the emotional consequences. We make inferences or guesses about what is happening, will happen, or will be happening. Inferences are statements of fact in this case that we believe it's a fact. They can be true or they can be false. Little time spent on inference, but is helpful in understanding the evaluations. Now, B causes C. The belief causes the emotional consequences. We are evaluative. We evaluate the facts in terms of what they meant to us. Can be conscious or out of awareness. But they're often unconscious beliefs that are habitual or automatic, like an automatic default that we go to. Often consisting of underlining rules about how life in the world should be. Now, C could be healthy or unhealthy. A and C happen in close proximity of each other, but C does not cause episodes to run the chain. When we're talking about this, what I'm talking about here, let me just make it very clear for you. I'll just use an example. A, B, and C episodes tend to run in chains, with C often becoming the A of another episode. We observe our own behaviors and emotions. For example, a person above could observe their avoidance of other people, interpret this as weak, and engage in self-downing, self-defeating beliefs, feed, initiate, and perpetual emotional disturbances. Did I confuse you there? Hopefully I didn't. What we're basically saying is that individuals, if this particular person, we said at the end, they became somewhat disappointed, then it could start this chain of events somewhere over, because there are some emotional consequences associated with that. So we're trying to make sure that they have some healthy cognition and to combat these faulty thinking or these feelings that they're having. Another thing, when we look at D, people feel the way they think. People feel the way they think. Change cognitions in order to change the person's feelings about themselves. Behaviors, cognitive restructuring is helpful. The client learn to monitor their self-talk, identify maladaptive self-talk, and substitute adaptive self-talk for negative self-talk. Okay? In E and F, note that this is not simply changing negative to positive, but more about changing inappropriate negative emotions to more appropriate negative emotions. Depression to sadness, anxiety to concern. Negative inappropriate emotions would be emotions lead to psychological discomfort or pain, motivates one to engage in self-defeating behavior. Okay, enough about that particular slide. The therapeutic task. Task 1. Show clients how they have incorporated dogmas into their thinking. This is negative self-talk. Task 2. Show how clients are keeping problems through their irrational thinking. Task 3. Help clients modify their thinking. And task 4. Challenge clients to develop rational philosophy of life. Techniques. You don't have to be warm and fuzzy in using these particular techniques. But some of the techniques that are used: reframing, which is redefining your perspective into a more positive stance. Referencing, conceptualizing a problem, looking at the whole picture. Then using humor, imagery, shame attacking, as we saw in the video, the first slide. Who cares what others think of you? Homework. What's the most important thing about homework? You tell me. What's the most important thing about homework? Therapeutic techniques. Therapists practicing REBT use the following techniques: disputing those irrational beliefs, doing cognitive homework, bibliotherapy, carefully selecting reading materials are used to assist the subject in solving personal problems or for other therapeutic purposes. Changing one's language. Psychoeducational methods. They also use rational emotive imagery. That is having the individual visualize the actual event as if it was occurring and taking them through the steps, such as the ABCDE process. Having them visualize those things. Using humor, role playing, shame attacking exercises, standard behavior therapy procedures. It's effective in treating assertion training. It's used for that. Depression, marital problems, sexual disorders, behavior disorders in children, prevention of cardiovascular disease, behavior disorders in children. This therapy was also used traditionally for persons that were incarcerated. So juveniles that are incarcerated or some adults. Okay? Cognitive therapy. I would like for you to pause this particular video. Again, there's a YouTube video that I would like for you to watch. It's the CBT training, baked beans phobia. Yes, believe it or not. Some people have phobias against baked beans. Now that you've watched the video, let's talk about cognitive therapy. Aaron Beck developed cognitive therapy, focusing on depression and anxiety. But Dr. Beck is most known for the Beck Depression Inventory. He believes that most mental disorders involve cognitive dysfunction and misinterpreting environmental cues. The theory and the goal of cognitive therapy. The basic theory is to understand the nature of an emotional episode or disturbance. It is essential to focus on the cognitive content of an individual's reactions to the upsetting stream of events or stream of thought. The goal is to change the way clients think by using their automatic thoughts to reach the core schemata. What is the schemata? Their belief system. And begin to introduce the idea of schema reconstructing that schema. Cognitive therapy. People are a product of biology and development, and their environment is the belief. People are also able to be self-determining. What does that mean? We mentioned that before in another theory, self-determining. They have the ability. People can, within the right conditions, if the right conditions are present, they can move forward and live a happy and meaningful life, or strive to live a happy and meaningful life. Emotions and behaviors are determined based on how someone perceives, interprets, and assigns meaning to an event. We build schemata which incorporates our belief systems and assumptions that become reinforced throughout our lives. These can be functional or dysfunctional. We've discussed this prior. When someone misreads a situation, they can exhibit a dysfunctional response. Again, when someone misreads a situation, they can exhibit a dysfunctional response. Just think about sometimes when someone said something or someone sent you a text message or an email and you misread it because you misinterpreted. Also, the cognitive triad of depression, the triad, their negative views of the world, self, and the future. Here's an example. Who gets road rage? You don't have to raise your hand because you're probably alone listening to this video, but just in case. Well, I definitely know a few people, and I've ridden with a few people. So let's try my tip called I know him or she is having the worst day ever. Imagine yourself driving, and if you're an individual that generally has a little road rage here and there, then you can definitely use a little imagery here. Imagine that someone is going slow in front of you. Now, how about you think to yourself, I know him or her, and they are having the worst day ever. Does that change your perception? Does it possibly help with road rage? We won't know until you actually try it. Now, one of Beck's major contributions was we make cognitive distortions. We distort reality to a point to where we're distressed. And these are some of the things that you will encounter when you're working with consumers. These are some things that you might actually find and that you can apply to yourself. Arbitrary inference. Drawing a conclusion that has no evidence or even contradicts evidence, or just arbitrarily. Selective abstraction, taking information out of context or ignoring certain portions of the information, being very selective. Overgeneralizations, making a general rule on the basis of one situation and applying it to all situations. Because this happened in this particular situation, that means that that's going to happen. Oh, they came from that particular area of town, so they all are that way. Magnification or minimization. Viewing something out of proportion is magnification. It's no big deal. I set the house on fire. Seriously? That's minimizing the behavior. Personalization, attributing external events to oneself without evidence of connection. Personalizing everything that's said. I, as a professor, might make a comment in a classroom. Through mere coincidence, you think that because what was stated applies to you and your current situation, that I'm talking about you. But it has nothing to do with you. Dichotomous thinking, seeing things in either or terms or in only a good or a bad way, seeing them in either good or bad. Nothing in between. Cognitive distortions, that's something that you should be very familiar with. Now, Beck's triad, cognitive triad, patterns that trigger depression. One, he says, client holds negative views of themselves. I'm a lousy person. Two, there's selective abstraction. Client interprets life events through a negative filter. The world is a negative place where bad things are bound to happen to me. Three, client holds a gloomy vision of the future. The world is bleak and it isn't going to improve. Therefore, what happens? It creates or triggers some type of depression or hopelessness. Techniques of cognitive therapy. They're generally short-term. One particular technique is decatastrophizing. Ask the client, what if a feared consequence happened? And then problem solving through it. Reattribution. Exploring other causes of the event. Think about your worst day ever. Could there be other events that happen that cause you to believe the way that you believe about a particular event? Redefining. Rewording phrases to give a client control or mastery. Redefining. Rewording. Decentering. Realizing the client is not the center of attention. Behavioral techniques. Exposure therapy is something that's been used with veterans. There are some other techniques out there that are used also within. We're looking at applying cognitive therapy. Hundreds of outcome trials have established cognitive therapy's efficacy for a wide range of problems. So this is evidence-based. It's been tested, it's been researched, it's been tried, it's been proven that it works. Okay? Cognitive techniques focus on identifying and examining a client's beliefs and the origins of their beliefs and modifying them if the client cannot support these beliefs. Behavioral techniques used by cognitive therapists include activity scheduling, behavioral experiments, skills training, role playing, behavior rehearsal, and exposure therapy. Now, cognitive techniques. Cognitive restructuring is the main technique used. Restructuring irrational and illogical conditions through ABCDE acronym, or reframing, redefining the negative into a more positive perspective, or referencing, conceptualize from a holistic perspective instead of a fragmented perspective. Direct questions, logical reasoning, and persuasion is used. Emotive techniques focus on the client's affects or the emotional domain. It helps the client to learn how to accept themselves, example through humor, or other techniques that use imagery to create more positive emotional patterns. Shame attacking exercises. Again, the client learns to overshadow shame by not worrying about others' perceptions of them. It's imaginal disputation. Client imagines a stressful situation and examines his or her self-talk during the imagined self-talk. Behavioral techniques. A full range of techniques to help the client achieve their goals. There's operant conditioning, behavior modification, assertiveness training, relaxation therapy, homework, role play, behavior disputation. Basically, the client behaves in a way that is the opposite of how they usually behave. The therapist is constantly confronting, disputing, and correcting the client's faulty beliefs. That's what you want to understand, that this is what's going on. You're constantly confronting, disputing, and correcting those faulty beliefs that the clients have about themselves. But this is not recommended for persons with mental illness. This is not recommended for persons with mental illness. The cognitive behavior model, when we're looking at thoughts, behaviors, feelings, emotions, or physical sensations. Beck's model illustrated how emotional problems can be driven by patterns of negative thinking and proposed that the problem could be alleviated by changing the thinking process. We're looking at thoughts and beliefs. These are those automatic negative thoughts. They are not usually under conscious control of the person. Remember, I said these things are generally unconscious. They are thoughts that result from maladaptive core beliefs and assumptions. Core beliefs and assumptions are developed through our early experiences as we grow up. If a person had difficulty or traumatic life experiences in their childhood, they are more likely to develop negative core beliefs and assumptions, which results in the automatic negative thoughts. If left unchallenged, they remain even as we grow older, those automatic negative thoughts. All of these elements of distress are related, so that a change in one can produce a change in the other. A negative change in one element can start a negative spiral or a vicious cycle through the impact that it has on the other elements of psychological distress. Cognitive behavior interventions attempt to break the cycle by creating positive changes in one or more of these particular elements. This is the model. We want to change something up, because if we change it in one, it's going to change it in another, and we want it to be positive, right? An example of the cognitive behavior model. Jane's thoughts about taking the exam. Consequences of behavior, we'll look at the thought, I will do well because I studied. The behavior, spend evening relaxing. The feelings, emotions, happiness, excitement, and physical sensation is relaxed. The consequences of behavior, feel relaxed, refreshed, confident the next day, performs well. Remember, Jane studied, so she can do this the day before. We'll look at this example again. Jane's thought about the exam. Thought, I am stupid and don't have the material. Behavior, stay up late studying. Feelings, emotions, anxiety. And physical sensations, muscle tension, rapid breathing. The consequences of her behavior, being tired due to lack of sleep, performs less well on the exam. Do we see that connection there? Remember, those cognitive interventions will produce change in thoughts and beliefs. Behavior intervention changes behavior. Interventions such as breathing retraining and relaxation produce a change in physical feelings. So these relaxation techniques that we can use. Emotions are affected indirectly by all of these interventions, your emotions. Where CBT intervention breaks the vicious cycle. Cognitive intervention, thought recording, thought challenging. Thought, I'm stupid and I don't know the material. The behavior, stay up late studying. Behavior intervention is goal setting. Set some goals. This is what you will do for this particular time. This is what you do at this particular time. Then we're looking at feelings and physical sensations. Physical interventions, relaxation exercises, controlled breathing, helping them with that. And if you can change one, remember, it'll change the results for the others. Here, I would like for you to pause the video. We're going to look at Donald Miechenbaum's cognitive behavior modification. That's the title for the video. There's the URL, the YouTube link. Now that you've watched the video, I just want to cover some things about the behavior modification. The focus is client self-verbalizations or self-statements. The premise, as a prerequisite to behavior change, clients must notice how they think, feel, and behave, and what impact they have on others. The basic assumption here, distressing emotions are typically the result of maladaptive thoughts. Miechenbaum's CBM, self-instructional therapy focus, trains clients to modify the instructions they give to themselves so that they can cope. Also places an emphasis on acquiring practical coping skills. So if you help them develop some effective coping skills, they will continue to use these, and whenever they have those automatic negative thoughts. Okay? Cognitive structure, the organizing aspect of thinking, which seems to monitor and direct the choice of thoughts. The executive processor. Cognitive structure. Strengths from a diversity perspective. What are the strengths of the cognitive behavior therapy from the diversity perspective? CBT uses the individual's belief systems or the worldview as a part of the method of self-exploration. So it's about the person, the individual. Clients from diverse backgrounds tend to appreciate the emphasis on cognition and action, as well as the stress on relationship issues. CBT and multicultural therapy share common assumptions that make integration possible. So this is a wonderful theory to use that has a multicultural component. Remember that the important thing about this particular slide is that you can integrate it and blend it into many of your approaches. Limitations from a diversity perspective. A potential limitation of REBT is its negative view of dependency, yet many cultures view interdependency as necessary to good mental health. The rapid-fire active approach used by some practitioners of REBT may alienate those who value being reflective. Therapists who rely on jargon using terms such as irrational or maladaptive may come across as disrespectful and insensitive to clients who have felt marginalized in society. So we have to be very, very careful about the words that we use. Also, the emphasis of CBT on assertiveness, independence, verbal ability, rationality, cognition, and behavioral change may limit its use in certain cultures that hold different values. And inexperienced therapists may overemphasize cognitive restructuring to the neglect of environmental interventions. Contributions of CBT. Both Ellis's REBT and Beck's cognitive therapy represent the most systematic applications of CBT. Both follow a defined plan of action. They are relatively brief and structured treatments, very structured, that are in keeping with the spirit of cost effectiveness and evidence-based practices. Cost effectiveness and evidence-based. Miechenbaum's work in self-instruction and stress inoculation training has been applied successfully to a variety of client populations and specific problems. A major contribution made by Ellis, the Becks, and Miechenbaum is the demystification of the therapy process. Limitations of CBT. Extensive training is required to practice CBT. Extensive training is required. Therapists may misuse power by imposing their ideas of what constitutes rational thinking on a client, so we have to be careful about that. The strong confrontational style of Ellis's REBT may overwhelm some clients because some individuals are not able to respond to that because it can be very, very strong, somewhat confrontational. Some clinicians think CBT interventions overlook the value of exploring a client's past experiences. And that's all, folks.